It all started on a massive space station that floated in the dark void of space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the occasional passing ship. This station, known as Omega-12, was infamous across the galaxy. It wasn't just any ordinary station. It was a prison, holding the most dangerous criminals in the entire universe. Dangerous, yes, but mostly forgotten by time. The only thing anyone really knew about Omega-12 was that it was built to house the worst of the worst. And the woman known only as Zira, she was the most dangerous of them all. At least that's what everyone thought. Jax Talon had never imagined his life would go like this. He was just a junior officer on the station, mostly tasked with maintenance and keeping things running smoothly. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make him stand out. Most days, he simply moved through the endless halls, repairing equipment, checking systems, and trying to avoid getting in trouble. He wasn't a hero, and he wasn't a villain. He was just someone trying to do his job and get by. But everything changed when the mistake happened. The station's main AI, a superintelligent system known as Vera, was in charge of keeping track of every prisoner on Omega-12. The system had thousands of commands, subroutines, and processes running at all times, ensuring that everyone stayed where they were supposed to. It was flawless. That is, until the glitch occurred. It wasn't the first time a mistake had happened with the AI, but it was by far the worst. Somehow someone, or something, had gotten into the system, and it led to one of the deadliest prisoners being freed. The worst part? It happened during Jax's shift. He had been near the control room when the alarm blared. The lights flickered, the floor vibrated beneath his boots, and a cold sweat formed on his brow. Jax's first thought was that this was a drill, but Vera's voice, normally calm and precise, had a slight tremor. "Prisoner breach detected. Security override initiated." The announcement echoed through the station, and Jax's stomach dropped. He knew what that meant. He wasn't just an officer. He was one of the few who had direct access to the security channels. He rushed to the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. The doors slid open, revealing a room filled with frantic officers. They all stared at the large screen, displaying the status of the prison cells. The screen flickered, glitching for a moment. Then the words appeared. "Prisoner Zira, status, released." Jax froze. Zira? The name sent chills down his spine. Her reputation was the stuff of legends. They said she was the galaxy's deadliest weapon, a woman with unmatched strength, intelligence, and brutality. Her crimes were legendary. Planets destroyed, governments toppled, entire species wiped out. But no one had ever seen her face. She was always locked away, somewhere in the deepest part of Omega-12, a place where no one could reach her, and now she was free. "Officer Talon," a voice called out, snapping Jax out of his trance. It was Commander Drace, the officer in charge of the security team. "Get to the holding sector and make sure the cells are locked down. Now!" Jax nodded quickly, his mind racing. He didn't need to be told twice. He ran down the hall, his boots echoing against the metal floors. He reached the holding sector, breathless, but found no one there. The guards had already been deployed, securing the cells, or at least that's what he thought. Then, the sound of footsteps reached his ears. They were slow, deliberate, like someone was savoring each step. He turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster. But then he stopped. It was her. Zira stood in front of him, tall and imposing, her long dark hair flowing behind her like a shadow. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that made Jax's heart race. She was beautiful, in a way that was almost terrifying. Her skin was a smooth, pale shade, and she had an air of quiet power that seemed to fill the entire room. Jax didn't know whether to run or stand his ground, but there was something in her gaze that kept him rooted to the spot. "Hello, officer," she said, her voice low and steady. "I'm afraid I've made a bit of a mess." Jax's breath caught in his throat. He was frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't supposed to be face-to-face with a woman like Zira. In fact, no one was supposed to ever see her. She was supposed to be locked away for eternity, a ghost of the galaxy's darkest past. But here she was, standing right in front of him. Jax didn't know what she wanted. He didn't know if she was going to kill him or leave him to die slowly in the wreckage of her escape. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to be able to stop her. Not by himself, I think, she said, taking a step closer. I'll need a partner for what comes next. Jax's heart raced even faster as he processed her words. Partner? Him? A partner in what? In escaping the station? In starting a revolution? Or worse, in committing more crimes? Zira's eyes softened just a little, as if she could sense his hesitation. You're the officer who made the mistake. You're the one who freed me. She smiled, but there was something dangerous in it. Now I think you're the one who has to live with it. Jax didn't have time to answer. The sounds of the station's security team rushing toward them echoed in the halls. The chaos had already begun. But now Jax wasn't sure if he could escape from Zira or if he even wanted to. Jax didn't know what to make of the situation. He was standing in front of Zira, the galaxy's deadliest woman, with only a few feet separating them. His mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few minutes. He had always been just an officer, someone who kept things running smoothly on Omega-12. But now, he was standing face-to-face with a woman who had been locked away for centuries. A woman who could tear apart entire armies with her bare hands. Come on, officer. We don't have much time, Zira said, her voice calm but firm. She didn't seem concerned at all about the incoming security team. In fact, she didn't seem concerned about anything. She was just waiting. Jax wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. The security team would be here any second, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to shoot first and ask questions later. He could hear the sounds of boots on the metal floor, the voices of the guards getting closer. The chaos had already begun. He needed to make a choice, help Zira or try to stop her. He glanced at her again. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those piercing eyes, locked onto his with a steady, almost knowing gaze. It was as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. Maybe she even knew what he was going to do before he did. That was the kind of person she was, always 10 steps ahead. I'm not a criminal, Zira said suddenly, breaking the silence. I never was, Jax frowned. You've killed hundreds of people, Those were lies, she interrupted. I didn't kill anyone. I was framed. I was used as a weapon, a tool of war. The galaxy's rulers wanted to silence me because I knew too much. I saw what they were doing in the shadows. I know their secrets, and they didn't want anyone to know the truth. Jax's mind was spinning. He had heard the stories. The galaxy had painted Zira as a ruthless murderer, a criminal who had destroyed entire civilizations without a second thought. But what if everything he had been told was a lie? What if she wasn't the villain everyone thought she was? He didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was clear. Zira wasn't what she seemed. You don't have to believe me, she continued. But you need to help me. If you don't, they'll come for both of us. And trust me, they won't stop until we're both dead. Jax hesitated. His heart was pounding in his chest. The security team was closing in, and he didn't have much time. He glanced over his shoulder, hearing the echo of boots growing louder. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. You're making a mistake, he muttered, barely audible. I'm just a low-ranking officer. I don't know anything about your plans, your past, or... Zira's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer to him. That's exactly why you're perfect, she said, her voice soft but intense. You're not part of their system. You don't belong to the galaxy's powers, and that makes you useful. You're the one who freed me, whether you wanted to or not. Now, you're part of this, whether you like it or not. Jax swallowed hard. He had never been a hero, never even wanted to be one. He had always just tried to follow orders, keep his head down, and make it through each day without causing trouble. But now, trouble had found him. The sound of weapons being drawn snapped him out of his thoughts. Jax turned to see the security. Team rounding the corner, blasters aimed at both him and Zira. They didn't hesitate. Without saying a word, they opened fire. Zira moved faster than Jax could blink. In an instant, she was between him and the incoming blaster shots, her body a blur of movement. She reached out, her hand grabbing one of the guards by the throat, lifting him off the ground with ease. The man struggled, but Zira's grip was unyielding. She threw him to the side like a rag doll, and he crashed into the wall, unconscious. Jax stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what he had just witnessed. She had moved so quickly, so effortlessly, it was like watching a predator in its natural element. The remaining guards hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They were trained to deal with criminals, not superhuman warriors. But before they could make their next move, Zira was on them. She grabbed a blaster from one of the fallen guards, expertly disarming the rest of the team with a few precise shots. Within seconds, all the weapons were gone, and the remaining officers were on the floor, groaning in pain. Zira stood over them, breathing heavily, but her face was calm, as though she had just done something as routine as eating breakfast. Jax couldn't believe what he had just seen. He had no idea how she did it. The speed, the strength, the precision. She was like something out of a nightmare. And yet there was something almost mesmerizing about it. It wasn't just her power. It was the way she controlled everything, how she seemed to know exactly what to do, exactly how to move. Zira turned to him, her eyes still locked onto his. "Now, officer," she said, her voice calm again. "We need to go, and you're coming with me." Jax opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't have a choice. Not anymore. The reality of the situation hit him all at once. He was no longer just a simple officer on a space station. He was a part of something, much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And whether he liked it or not, he was now a partner in crime with the galaxy's most dangerous woman. With a deep breath, Jax stepped forward, unsure of what the future held, but knowing one thing. For sure, there was no turning back now. Jax had no idea where they were going. The halls of Omega-12, once so familiar to him, now felt like a maze of confusion. He could hear the hum of the station's engines in the background, the distant voices of other officers and workers still, trying to respond to the chaos that had erupted since Zira's release. But now, he wasn't just an observer, he was part of the madness. Zira moved with purpose, her steps confident and sure, like she had been here before, despite having been locked away for centuries. She didn't seem worried, not even a little. Every turn she took was calculated, and every step she made seemed to take them further away from the station's control center and closer to the unknown. Jax couldn't help but watch her. He had never seen someone like her before. So calm, so dangerous, yet oddly composed. There was no panic in her eyes, no sign that she was running for her life. It was as if she was simply going through the motions of a plan she had been working on for years, and Jax, for better or worse, was now part of that plan. "Why me?" Jax asked, his voice low, but he could hear the frustration in it. He had been trying to wrap his head around everything that had happened, but the truth was, he didn't understand. He was just a low-ranking officer on a prison station. Why had she chosen him? Why had she kept him alive when she could have easily killed him and gone on her way? Zira glanced back at him, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her gaze that softened just a little. "You're useful," she replied simply. "You're not part of the system. They don't own you. That makes you different." Jax didn't respond right away. The truth of her words stung more than he cared to admit. He had always thought of himself as just another cog in the machine, someone who did his job without question. But now, in this new reality, he wasn't sure where he fit. He wasn't even sure what to believe anymore. They reached a set of heavy doors, and Zira punched in a code without even glancing at the control panel. The doors slid open with a low hiss, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Jax hesitated before following her inside. What was behind that door? Another secret? Another part of her plan? He didn't know, but he wasn't in any position to question her. Not yet. The corridor was dimly lit, the walls covered in old, peeling metal. It looked like part of the station that had been abandoned long ago, forgotten by the people who ran Omega-12. As they moved deeper into the shadows, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But there was no turning back, now. The station was in chaos, and Zira wasn't slowing down. She was leading them somewhere, and Jax could only hope that wherever it was better than where they had been. They stopped in front of a large metal door, far more reinforced than any of the others they had passed. Zira moved to the side and pressed a small button hidden in the wall, causing the door to slide open with a loud creak. Behind it was a small room filled with old control panels, computers, and strange equipment that Jax didn't recognize. But there was something else in the room, a sleek silver ship parked in the corner. It looked like something straight out of a military fleet, far beyond anything Jax had ever seen on Omega-12. Zira stepped forward and gestured for Jax to follow her. "This is our way out," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "We need to get to the ship, and then we'll leave this place behind." Jax didn't know what to say. The ship was like nothing he had ever seen. It was advanced, sleek, and clearly built for speed. There was no way it could belong to Omega-12. But how had Zira known about it? Had she planned this all along? Before he could ask, Zira continued. "This ship will take us to the outer rim. It's where I can disappear. It's where we can start. Over." "Start over?" Jax repeated. He was still trying to catch up. "You mean you're not done? You're not just going to escape and disappear?" Zira shook her head. "I'm not running away. I'm going to finish what I started. The people who locked me away, they thought they could bury the truth. But the galaxy needs to know. They need to understand why I was really locked away and what they've been hiding from everyone." Jax felt a chill run down his spine. He had always assumed that Zira was just a violent criminal, someone who had done terrible things. But now he was starting to see a different side of her. She wasn't just some ruthless killer. She was a woman with a purpose that went beyond her own survival. They climbed into the ship, and Zira quickly started the systems, the hum of the engine vibrating through the floor beneath them. Jax took a seat beside her, his mind racing. They were leaving Omega-12 and there was no turning back. But where would they go? What would they do once they were free? "You still don't understand, do you?" Zira said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "The galaxy is broken, Jax. There are people in power who have been pulling the strings for far too long. They've kept the truth hidden from everyone. But we're going to change that. You're going to help me expose the lies." Jax didn't answer at first. He couldn't. There were too many questions swirling in his head, and none of them had easy answers. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to just sit back and watch anymore. Zira had changed everything. And somehow he was going to be part of whatever came next. The ship powered up, and the familiar sights of Omega-12 began to fade as they moved further into the unknown. Jax felt a strange sense of anticipation in his chest. Whatever happened next, it was going to be far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced, and there was no turning back now. As the ship cut through the void of space, the stars stretched out in every direction, distant and cold. Jax sat quietly beside Zira, his mind still racing. The ship was a sleek, silent vessel, designed for speed and stealth. He could feel the hum of the engines beneath his feet, a steady reminder that they were now far from Omega-12, far from the life he had known. They were moving into uncharted space, heading toward the unknown, and Jax had no idea what would happen next. He glanced at Zira, who sat at the controls with a calm expression. She seemed unfazed by everything that had happened. To her, this was just another part of her plan. She had been locked away for so long, and now that she was free, she didn't seem concerned about what lay ahead. In some strange way, it was as if she had already won. "You don't look worried," Jax said, breaking the silence. His voice was tinged with disbelief. They had just escaped a prison station, and he had no idea where they were going. Yet here, she was, cool and collected, as if nothing had changed. Zira didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the controls, her fingers moving with practiced ease over the ship's interface. "Worrying won't help," she replied. "We're not running away. We're on the path to something bigger. You should be focused on what comes next." Jax wasn't sure what she meant. "What do you mean, something bigger? Where are we even going?" She finally glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "The galaxy has been controlled by a small group of people for too long. They've kept the truth hidden, buried beneath layers of lies. The people don't know what's really going on. I intend to change that. And you're going to help me, Jax." Was quiet for a moment, trying to wrap his head around her words. It was clear now that Zira wasn't just escaping for her own freedom. She had a plan, a purpose. But what was it? And why had she chosen him to help her? "I don't know how much help I'll be," Jax said, his voice low. "I'm just a small-time officer. I don't know the things you know. I don't have your skills." Zira's lips twitched into the smallest of smiles. "You don't need to be like me. You have your own strengths, Jax. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not. The first step is to understand that." Jax looked away, out the small window beside him, watching as the stars blurred past. The ship was moving faster than anything he had ever seen, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the speed. But that wasn't what filled his mind. He thought about the galaxy, about all the lies and corruption Zira had mentioned. He thought about his own life, how simple it had been before, how safe it had seemed. But now, everything was different. "Where? Are we going?" Jax asked again, his voice more insistent this time. "What's the plan?" Zira took a deep breath and adjusted the ship's course slightly. "We're going to the Outer Rim. It's a place where the law doesn't reach. There are people there who've been forgotten by the galaxy's rulers. They've been left to survive on their own, far from the watchful eyes of the governments. They're rebels, outcasts, people who don't have anything to lose. We're going to find them, and we're going to expose the truth." Jax felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Expose the truth? What truth? Zira's eyes narrowed slightly as she focused on the stars ahead. The truth about the galaxy's rulers, about the things they've done, the secrets they've hidden. They imprisoned me because I knew too much. But I wasn't the only one. There are others out there who've seen what's really going on, who've been silenced. It's time to bring all of that to light. Jax didn't know what to say. He had never been a part of anything like this. He had been an officer, yes, but he had never been involved in any rebellion or revolution. He had never thought of himself as someone who could change the galaxy. But as he listened to Zira, something in him stirred. She wasn't asking him to just follow her. She was asking him to be part of something bigger, something that could shake the very foundations of the galaxy. "What happens when we find these people?" Jax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens next?" Zira's gaze softened for just a moment, and for the first time, Jax saw a hint of something other than the cold, calculating woman he had been working with. There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, a quiet intensity that spoke of years of pain and struggle. "Then we fight," she said simply. "We fight for the truth. We fight for those who've been silenced, and we make sure that the people in power never get away with what they've done." Jax didn't know if he was ready for that kind of fight. But looking at Zira, he couldn't deny that there was something inside him that wanted to believe. She had been locked away for so long, yet she still carried the fire of a warrior within her. He could feel it, even now, as they flew through space toward the unknown. They weren't just running anymore. They were about to start something. And whether Jax was ready or not, he knew that he was going to be a part of it. The stars outside the window seemed to stretch endlessly, a reminder that they were heading into uncharted territory. Jax couldn't see the future, couldn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Whatever came next, it was going to change everything. The days in space passed in a blur. The quiet hum of the ship became a constant backdrop to Jax's thoughts. He couldn't stop thinking about what Zira had said, about the truth, about the people in power, and about the fight that was coming. He had always lived a simple life, following orders and doing his job without question. But now, that life seemed so far away, as though it belonged to someone else. Zira didn't speak much in those days. She focused on the ship's systems, ensuring they stayed on course, making small adjustments when necessary. She had a way of moving through the ship with purpose, as though every action was part of a carefully thought-out plan. It was clear that she wasn't just acting on impulse. Everything she did had meaning, every move calculated to get them closer to their goal. Jax, on the other hand, spent most of his time trying to process everything. There were too many questions and not enough answers. Who were these people Zira spoke of, the ones in power who had kept the galaxy's secrets hidden for so long? What was the truth that they feared so much? And why had Zira been the one to uncover it? He couldn't deny that she was powerful, but was she really the key to uncovering all of this? Was he? It was on the fourth day, as the ship neared the outer rim of the galaxy, that everything started to change. The calm silence of space was suddenly interrupted by the sharp beeping of the ship's alarms. Jax shot to his feet, his heart racing. Zira, who had been sitting in the pilot's seat, didn't even flinch. She simply reached out and silenced the alarm with a press of a button. "There's a ship tailing us," she said, her voice calm, as always. "I've been expecting this." Jax frowned. "Expecting it? How?" Zira turned to him, her expression serious now. "We're not the only ones interested in the outer rim. There are people out there who know what we're doing, and they won't. Let us get to the rebels without a fight. But we have the advantage. I've been preparing for this moment." Jax didn't have time to ask any more questions. The ship behind them was closing in fast, its shape becoming clearer in the distance. It was large, military-grade, and moving with purpose. Jax could tell it was no ordinary ship. It was designed for combat. The thought made his stomach tighten. This wasn't just a random encounter. Whoever was on that ship had a reason for following them. Zira's hands moved quickly across the controls, and the ship lurched as she engaged the boosters. "Hold on," she said. The ship shot forward, racing away from the pursuing vessel. But the other ship was faster. It gained on them with alarming speed, and soon Jax could hear the sound of weapons charging up, the unmistakable hum of energy blasts charging in the ship's cannons. "Brace yourself," Zira warned again. The first shot struck the side of their ship, shaking it violently. The lights flickered, and Jax had to grab onto the nearest railing to steady himself. He could hear the sound of the ship's shields absorbing the impact, but it was clear that the enemy was getting closer, pushing them into a corner. "Why aren't we fighting back?" Jax shouted over the noise. He could feel the ship's shields flickering, the pressure building as the enemy's ship fired again. Each blast felt like it was pushing them closer to the edge. Zira's expression remained calm. "Because I'm not ready to fight them yet," she said. "I need more time. I've been gathering information, and I can't afford to lose it all just yet." Jax didn't understand. "More time? We're being shot at, and you want to—" Before he could finish, Zira suddenly veered the ship into a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding another blast. The enemy ship followed suit, refusing to give up the chase. The maneuver was enough to knock Jax off his feet, and he stumbled to the ground. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind was racing. This was no longer just about escaping. This was about survival. "Get to the rear control panel," Zira ordered. "I need you to assist me." Jax didn't question her. He scrambled to his feet and rushed to the rear of the ship, his mind still trying to catch up with the situation. He wasn't a pilot, and he had no idea how to help, but he trusted Zira. She had a plan, and that was enough for him. The rear control panel was lined with complex systems Jax didn't understand, but there was one button that stood out. It was marked with a simple symbol, EMP. Jax hesitated for a moment, unsure what it would do, but Zira's voice broke through the uncertainty. "Press it. Now." He slammed his hand down on the button. Immediately, the ship shook, and the alarms blared once again. The enemy ship's weapons went silent, and its lights flickered. The sudden loss of power from the EMP blast left the enemy ship temporarily disabled. The pursuers were still in range, but now they were scrambling to recover. "Good," Zira said, her voice filled with approval. "Now let's get out of here." She pushed the ship's engines to full power, and they shot forward, leaving the disabled enemy ship behind. Jax could hear the hum of the engines increasing in pitch as they gained speed, leaving the threat of immediate danger behind. As they flew further into the unknown, Jax took a deep breath, still trying to steady his nerves. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The enemy ship had been close, too close. If Zira hadn't acted when she did, they would have been caught. But now, they were free. For the moment. "You were right," Jax said, his voice shaky. "You really were expecting this." Zira didn't answer right away. She simply kept her eyes fixed on the stars ahead, the ship's systems humming steadily beneath them. "It's not over yet," she said quietly. "They'll keep coming for us. But now we know they're not the only ones watching. The rebels on the outer rim aren't the only ones who'll want to join us. And now, the truth is one step closer to being revealed." Jax didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. He wasn't just along for the ride anymore. He was part of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined, and whatever came next, he was ready to face it. The ship drifted quietly through space, the stars outside twinkling like distant diamonds in the dark. Jax had never been so far from everything he knew. The station, the crew, the simple life he had taken for granted, everything had been left behind in a blur of confusion and chaos. Now, as they moved deeper into the unknown, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though there was nothing in sight but the vast, empty expanse of space. Zira, as usual, didn't seem concerned. She sat in the pilot's seat, her eyes scanning the stars ahead. She had been calm and in control since the moment they escaped Omega-12, but Jax could tell that something had shifted in her. There was a new intensity in her eyes, a focused determination that made him realize just how much she had planned for this moment. "We'll be meeting with the rebels soon," she said, breaking the silence. Jax turned toward her. "Rebels. Are they the ones you were talking about? The ones who've been silenced?" Zira nodded. "Yes. They're the ones who've been fighting the system, the ones who know the truth. They've been hiding on the outer rim just out of reach of the galaxy's rulers. But they won't be hiding much longer." Jax felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had never considered himself a revolutionary, never imagined that he would be part of something so dangerous. But now, he was headed straight into the heart of the rebellion, and he had no idea what to expect. "What's the plan once we meet?" "Them?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Zira didn't look at him as she spoke. "We join forces. We expose the truth. We show the galaxy what they've been hiding. And we make sure that no one like me ever gets locked away again." Jax was quiet for a long time. He had always believed in following orders, doing what was expected of him. But now, He was beginning to understand that the rules he had lived by weren't the only ones that mattered. There was something bigger at play, something that went beyond the laws of Omega-12 or the orders of any commanding officer. The more he thought about it, the more Jax realized that Zira wasn't just a criminal. She was a symbol, a person who had been wronged by a system that didn't care about the truth. And the more he heard her talk about the rebellion, the more he started to believe in her cause. As the hours passed, Jax and Zira continued their journey through space, heading deeper into the unknown. The ship was moving smoothly now, the alarms no longer blaring and the threat of the enemy ship far behind them. But the tension in Jax's chest wouldn't ease. He knew that they weren't safe, not by a long shot. There were still enemies out there, waiting to strike. It was late into the night when the ship's sensors picked up a signal. It was faint, almost too faint to notice, but Zira caught it immediately. Her fingers flew over the control panel, adjusting the ship's course. With expert precision, the signal was coming from a small planet near the edge of the outer rim, a place no one in the galaxy had heard of. Jax watched as Zira made the necessary adjustments. "Who's out there?" he asked. "A friend," she replied cryptically. "Someone who can help us get to the rebels." Jax wasn't sure what she meant, but he didn't ask any more questions. The ship was now on a direct course for the planet. As they approached, Jax could see the dim outline of the planet's surface through the ship's window. It was small, rocky, and uninhabited by most standards. But Jax knew that the people they were about to meet weren't ordinary. They landed on the planet's surface without incident. The ship's landing gear hit the ground with a soft thud, and the doors hissed open. Zira stood up, her eyes scanning the horizon as she moved toward the exit. Jax followed, still unsure of what to expect. The air outside was thick with dust, the landscape barren and harsh. The planet seemed almost lifeless, a place where survival was a daily struggle. But there, in the distance, Jax could make out a small group of figures standing at the edge of a rocky outcrop. They were waiting for them. Zira's pace quickened as they approached, her eyes narrowing. "Stay close," she said, her voice low. As they got closer, the figures came into sharper view. They were a mixed group, men and women, all dressed in rugged, worn clothing. They didn't look like soldiers or rebels, but more like survivors. People who had learned how to live off the land. They were armed, but not with the high-tech weapons Jax was used to. Their weapons were makeshift, cobbled together from scrap and salvaged parts. One of the figures stepped forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered by years of harsh living. But his eyes were sharp, filled with an intelligence. That reminded Jax of Zira. "Zira," the man said in a gruff voice, his gaze flicking to Jax before returning to her. "You've finally come." Zira nodded, her expression serious. "I need your help. We're ready to move." The man looked at Jax, studying him carefully. "Is this the one?" he asked. Zira's eyes didn't leave the man's face. "Yes, he's with me." The man nodded slowly. "All right then, let's get to work." Jax didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. His life was never going to be the same again. The path ahead was unclear, filled with dangers and unknowns. But now, he wasn't just following orders anymore. He was part of something much bigger, something that could change the galaxy. As they moved toward the camp, Jax felt a strange sense of purpose building inside him. For the first time, he understood why Zira was willing to risk everything. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to fight alongside her. The sun on the planet's surface was harsh, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Jax shielded his eyes as he followed Zira through the rocky terrain. The group of rebels, led by the man they had met, moved quickly, their footsteps steady despite the uneven ground. The camp wasn't far, but Jax could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on him. They were moving deeper into enemy territory now. The planet they had landed on might have been small and uninhabited to most, But for Zira and her cause, it was a vital piece in the puzzle they were about to complete. Zira kept her pace steady, her eyes scanning their surroundings. She was focused, and Jax couldn't help but notice how different she seemed now. Back on the ship, she had been the calculated leader, always calm, always in control. But here, surrounded by the rebels and facing the uncertainty of the upcoming fight, there was something else in her. It was a quiet determination, something that Jax could sense but not fully understand. "Keep up, Jax," Zira called without turning around. He hurried to match her speed, still trying to adjust to everything. His life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined just a few weeks ago. Now, he was walking with rebels, heading toward a fight that could change the galaxy forever. He hadn't signed up for this, but somewhere along the way, he'd realized that he didn't have a choice anymore. The past was gone. This was his new reality. They reached the camp just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The camp was small, tucked away between a series of rocky hills. Tents were scattered around, and Jax could see several people working near a fire. They all stopped and looked up when they saw Zira and the others approach. Some of them were younger, probably just trying to survive, while others had the hardened look of veterans who had been fighting for far too long. The man who had greeted them earlier walked toward Zira. He had a serious expression on his face, but there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "Everything's ready," he said. "We've set up the base. It's not much, but it's enough to get started." Zira nodded, her eyes briefly flicking to Jax. "Good. We need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more time they have to react. I'm not taking any chances." Jax didn't ask what she meant. He could see it in her eyes. She was planning something, and he was going to be part of it whether he was ready or not. The uncertainty was starting to build again in his chest. What if they weren't ready? What if the rebellion wasn't enough to fight back against the galaxy's rulers? What if they failed? "Jax," Zira said, her voice low but firm. "Come with me. We need to talk." He followed her into a small tent at the edge of the camp. Inside, a table was covered with maps and scattered papers, most of them marked with symbols and coordinates that Jax didn't understand. A holographic display blinked quietly in the corner, showing the positions of various forces across the galaxy. Zira moved to the table and gestured for him to sit. Jax hesitated for a moment before taking a seat. The weight of what was happening was starting to hit him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Everything had been moving so fast, and now they were about to take the next step. But what if it was too much? What if they weren't strong enough? "You're not alone in this, Jax," Zira said, as if reading his thoughts. "This fight is bigger than just you and me. There are people out there who have been waiting for this moment. People who have been hiding, watching, preparing." Jax nodded slowly. "But we don't even know what we're up against yet. The galaxy's rulers, the ones who locked you away, how do we know they won't just crush us before we even get started?" Zira leaned forward, her eyes never leaving his. "They will try," she said quietly. "But they're not as strong as they think. They've kept the truth hidden for so long they've forgotten how to fight the way we do. We have the element of surprise on our side. We're not just fighting with weapons. We're fighting with the truth." Jax took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that were rising in his chest. He had never been part of something like this, never thought he would be standing in the middle of a rebellion, facing down the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But now, with Zira by his side and the rebels ready to fight, he understood what she meant. This wasn't just about weapons or armies. It was about exposing the lies that had kept people in the dark for so long. "Where do we start?" Jax asked, his voice steady. Zira glanced at the map. "We start by sending a message, a signal. We broadcast the truth to the galaxy. It will be the spark that lights the fire." The plan sounded simple, but Jax knew it wasn't. They were about to take on an entire system, a system that had controlled everything for as long as anyone could remember. And they would do it by exposing the truth. It was a risky move, but Zero was right. It was their only chance. The feeling of uncertainty still lingered, but something else was starting to grow inside Jax. A sense of purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure that the galaxy would never forget the truth again. He wasn't just an officer anymore. He was part of something bigger. He was part of a revolution. As he looked at Zira, standing strong in front of the map, he realized that he had made the right choice. No matter how difficult the road ahead would be, he wasn't going to back down now. He was in this for the long haul. The sound of footsteps outside the tent interrupted his thoughts. The rebels were getting ready. They were preparing for the fight ahead, and Jax knew that everything was about to change. The galaxy had been built on lies, but soon it would learn the truth, and they would be the ones to make sure of it.